is going on, YouTube? Thank you for tuning in to the live Q&A. Roid Sage, I do appreciate everyone for chopping in here. Now, a couple things before I get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. I did finally get the Discord started. I had tons of people asking me about it when I was still trying to get it to work. I finally got it to work, and it took a ton of effort. I know it's a small community right now, but it's something that I'm obviously going to be putting in time to build, as well as build this YouTube channel. So expectations are that that exceptionally builds as well. There's a lot of resources for you there, a lot of coaches who know what they're doing, including myself, who would love to answer any questions that you have about your supplements. We all know what we're talking about here, pharmacology, and your other things as well, nutrition, training, all of this stuff. There is tiers, and it is a paid Discord because I want to find a way to support this channel so that I can keep posting videos daily for the end of time, hopefully, until I need to retire due to some unforeseeable circumstances. But the Discord is the best way to support me as a content creator, as well as a coach, providing you guys information as much as I can for as free as I can, unless you decide to hire me for a coach. So what's up, Jay Gambler? What's up, Kevin? I appreciate you guys being here. So you guys know the spiel. Basically, I will answer as many questions as I possibly can as they come through in regards to anything relevant to pharmacology, training, anything, truly, as long as they're within the means of what I know. And if I don't know what I'm talking about, I will openly tell you I don't know. But as far as bodybuilding is concerned, there's very little that I don't in application do or know. So you got pretty much an open book here. There's actually a really interesting video that I'm going to cover very soon on Cali Muscle, and he talks a lot about some of the things that I think a lot of people actually should be worried about, which is drug use in specific, and like how he got to where he is. And I'm going to cover this in great depth. He talks a lot about it being sodium based, and that's kind of why he specifically, had a heart attack when he did, and et cetera, had to stop doing what he was doing. But there's a lot more to the story that he's not telling, and I want to kind of explain this. I've made a video in the past about his heart attack and what happened. I think it was like 3 years ago now. And I'm going to kind of re-bring this up and talk about it in a way that's more educational, more focused on giving you guys the essential information so that you can prevent stuff like this from happening to yourself. And it wasn't ramen noodles and sodium like he says it was. That's just absolutely fucking crazy. Joshua Perry, what kind of doses of T-ball do MMA guys take versus bodybuilders? That's a really good question, actually. The doses aren't going to differ too much. The only thing you want to be conscientious of in terms of bodybuilding is having, conscientious of in terms of like fighting in any kind of sports, not just MMA, any kind of combat sport, or I would say any sport that requires a ton of physical demand, is weight gain. And that is the one variable that you need to be extremely conscientious of, because if weight does continue to climb quite rapidly, you immediately become slower, and you begin to get slower as weight continues to climb. It's good in some senses because as weight climbs, so too does your force production. But in general, most of these smaller guys are thriving within the arena. If you are competing against someone who is more of a heavier weight, and he hits hard, it might be actually advantageous to put on that little bit of excess weight. But generally speaking, we're talking about literally as much as 10 to 15 milligrams per training session in the camp leading up to whatever XYZ event is, and maybe peaking around a dose of 20 to 25 milligrams. It's really low. It's not much at all. It's what most females would probably be taking. But the goal is we're not using it to gain contractile tissue. We're not using it to gain glycogen retention. We're not using it to gain even nitrogen retention. We're looking to improve recovery even by 15, 20%, which is exceptional for someone who's in a combat sport, because that means you can get back to training much faster. And we're looking to even more importantly, increase the motor unit recruitment ability and the motor learning in terms of the patterns that you'll be fighting with. So, the combos that you're going to be throwing, the kicks, that whatever, is your discipline, particularly, you want to be able to refine that really well, especially in the camp leading up to the event. This is what T-ball would be primarily used for in that situation. Jay Gambler asks, currently running 500 tests on my cycle. In the interest of sorry, in the interest of using what I have on hand, I started using 250 enanthate and the other half cypionate. Would mixing esters like this be an issue at all? No, it should be just fine. They're generally different, but about the same. The quotes of people saying that they're different in length of half-life and all these things, they're kind of just speculatory. There's not actually a ton of research on cypionate. I've heard endocrinologists on Peter Attia's podcast say that cypionate is more anabolic because it retains more fluid. And I'm like, what is your fucking definition of anabolic? And other people say that enanthate doesn't actually have a half-life of 8 to 10 days. It's actually like 2 days. And all of it's just pure garbage. We have data. It's very clear. Enanthate generally lasts 8 to 10 days, depending on your injection method and location. That does change things. For example, if you pin in your shoulders, you have a quicker onset and shorter half-life compared to if you pin in your glutes, for example. But generally speaking, there should be no issues at all. Absolutely none. Personal favorite products from Amino Asylum. Is AA actually Amino Asylum? So for me, generally, I do. I'm a big neurological guy, so like I love. Boy, I don't necessarily need a whole lot in terms of like anabolic output, quote unquote, but I do like the effects of having this like outward drive in a cognitive sense. So for me, my favorites, honestly, there's a ton. I like Stampede. Hold on, let me pull it up here. I'm trying to find it and my camera's in the way. Amino Asylum. I like Stampede. I like there is another one that you guys just released. It's called, it has like just ATP and then something else, which I absolutely love. Let me go through it here. Might as well just like take a trip around the rosy and see what's going on. Hopefully YouTube doesn't absolutely butt rape me for this because they love to hate Amino Asylum for some reason. So for me, let's see. Okay, so I do really do enjoy the BPC spray just because injecting it can be kind of tumultuous. And from what we've kind of had as new research surface, it is pretty systemic. So intranasally spraying BPC sounds like a fantastic idea outside of having to inject it, let's say locally towards like a knee or a fucking toe or some crazy shit like that. That is absolutely for me like a no-go, and I would never want to do it. The glutathione spray is one of my favorites. I love glutathione. I've openly talked about kind of like how on prep I've used 600 milligrams once weekly, and every time I would use 600 milligrams of glutathione injectable, I would get like literally a 8 to 10 pound drop the following day, which I perceived as like stress just kind of falling off my physique. And that I completely contributed to glutathione because there's virtually no other reason that was happening in isolation outside of the administration of glutathione. I think it's a really powerful compound. For people who can't afford growth hormone, I like to use HGH Freg. This is obviously biased towards fat loss. So it's something that I would use like in an intramuscular injection before activity, like a good hour before activity, ideally 2 hours before activity, as one of my go-tos just to continue increasing fat loss. All-time favorite might just be IGF LR3. This is something I use historically with many different clients to get lots of amazing results, pretty substantial results, especially with weaker body parts. In females, I think IGF-1 is a totally underutilized compound. Injecting it locally in the glutes or hamstrings can be such a favorable outcome for a female who's looking to grow, an example, wellness, who's looking to grow just their hamstrings and glutes. This IGF-1 LR3 can be a game changer, like an absolute fucking game changer, you guys. It's huge. Absolutely massive for women, and obviously men too. Like there's a lot of benefits for men that I would say are wildly effective. Like if you need arm volume, like if you need actual arm size, localized injections of IGF-1 LR3, the way to go. And I always go through Amino Asylum when I'm having guys get that. What else do we got here? There's a lot. There's so many products. Yeah, I think those are kind of the big ones. The fun ones are definitely, let me just go through here and see if I can. CMAX, that's a fun one. I do like that for the cognitive enhancement. New Peps, also thoroughly love that compound. I find it extremely beneficial. Again, for a highly fatiguing situation, let's just say you're like me and you work, 16 plus hours a day sometimes. It's real fucking reality. And you are highly CNS fatigued or just fucking crabby. New Pep's a great way to get a little bit of euphoria and continued progression in terms of actually making effort towards something that is productive. I love it in terms of that. I do like hyaluronic acid in terms of site enhancement oil for people who are really struggling with, again, arms is usually the only case in which I'd use that if they're not already injecting gear into their arms. Yeah, Stampede is the one I love. That is probably my favorite for the ATP. I don't love super shredder because my heart rate just goes through the fucking roof, but that one's good for some people. Yeah, I mean, those are kind of my favorites. I really went through there a lot. Those are about the basics that I would love. Trizepatide's good too for specifically appetite depression. So that's kind of my thoughts on what's my favorite. Hopefully that helps out. If you guys like that shit, use code Coach Colton, all caps, and you get 25% off whatever you order for select products. All right, Liam, what do we got? Do you think there is a metabolism downregulation post-show? I hear some people saying it's actually downregulation, and other people say that metabolism is minimally impaired. Well, it depends on the situation, right? If you're using large doses of thyroid, for example, there is going to be some impairment towards your natural access if you then take that out post-show. I think what really happens is people have such a high metabolic rate from taking clenbuterol, taking albuterol, taking L-carnitine, taking T3, taking T4, taking a high dose of anabolics. And then when they come off of that prep, they come off of all those drugs and suddenly their thermogenic rate isn't as great. And also the transition from being in a highly stimulated environment to a non-stimulated environment does cause an impact in thermogenic rate just naturally. This isn't because of anybody's like wrongdoing or anything. It's just kind of the natural way of the body, right? Like the body doesn't want to be in a constant state of sympathetic drive, which is like that fight or flight. So when it stops and it's been floored in that state for 16 weeks, it's going to want to chill out. And sometimes that might actually be perceived as like a downregulation in metabolism. Really what that is just your body sort of like decompressing. And you have to give it time to recover. Most people, what I do is I'll keep them on clenbuterol. I'll keep them on T3. I'll keep them on T4 after the show, but it's not at the high dose. So like, let's say they were using 80 micrograms of clenbuterol before the show weekend. After the show weekend, after they've had their fun and done their things, and we've gotten them rehydrated because I don't want to cause any more cardiometabolic effects when they're dehydrated. We'll introduce the clenbuterol again, but only at like 20 micrograms. And then we'll introduce the T3 again, but only at half the dose, usually 12.5 micrograms. I don't find myself, unless it's a significant fat loss phase where like the person is just truly fat, I don't find myself going over 25 micrograms of T3. So we usually come back down to 12.5 micrograms. And then from there, we go to 0 micrograms. The other thing that I'm doing is I'm making sure that micronutrients are balanced. So I'm looking at things like selenium and including Brazil nuts and wild caught salmon in that post-show window so that they can get plenty of selenium. I'm ensuring that they're using iodized salts to make sure that the thyroid axis has plenty of prerequisite material to make more thyroid hormone. And I'm also making sure that they're doing cardio still. A lot of people just completely stop doing cardio post-show, and I think that's like the biggest nightmare you could ever make for yourself. I think you should be doing cardio year-round. Personally, I don't think this. I know this. It's the most effective way to build muscle, and many people won't agree with that, but it's what it is. And so I think just what it is a complete reversal of what people were doing in prep, because they think that, generally speaking, the prep is a certain time of year, the off-season is a different time of year, when really it's all just a continuation of the same thing. So to answer your question legitimately, there's probably downregulation because they're coming off of drugs. As a counter argument there, it's more likely just the body having a release of stress and then not having to be so constantly aggravated by these basically oral versions of adrenaline and then stimulating that metabolism 24/7. And then what you're seeing as a representation is like a weight gain because of that constant throttling of your thermogenic rate. Kevin Turner, Regarding fertility protocols, FSH plus HCG, currently on 200 milligrams of test, 75 units of FSH 3 times weekly, 112, 50 units of HCG 3 times a week. That's a thick dose. Will running higher doses of test say three? No, it won't. It will. So I'll finish the question. Sorry. Say 350 to 500 milligrams of testosterone reduce the impact of the fertility medication. No, it won't. So this is a big misconception, and a lot of pros still have it, right? That they have to, if they want a baby, if they want fertility in specific, that they have to come off all drugs. And it's mind-boggling to me. It's very clear, even with just HCG monotherapy, that you can regain and sustain fertility metrics that are impressive on very high doses of trenbolone, testosterone, nandrolone, masteron, primobolan, you name it, and be just fine. What I think most people get conflicted with is that there's already sort of this downregulation from these exogenous hormones, and they're thinking, well, like my endogenous system isn't going to be signaling to my testes to produce it. And you're right; you're not going to be naturally committing to spermatogenesis, but you're already backlogging what is the signaling mechanism to commit to spermatogenesis, right? So like it's two systems in the body, and you're filling one system with testosterone exogenously, and you're filling another system with the signaling hormones. So like the loop of communication between those two systems is completely disconnected, but you're just manually filling the information for those two systems, if this makes sense. So you can still take as much gear as you'd like. And I say this with confidence because I've had many people who've gone through fertility protocols on high doses of trenbolone, high doses of nandrolone, what theoretically should be the most anti-fertility drugs, and they do absolutely amazing and have beautiful children. Mostly females, but beautiful children nonetheless. This happened 4 times now for me, I believe. So yeah, I think that would be just fine in my personal experience with clients. And just as a anecdote, when I was on I was on 700 milligrams of testosterone, 700 milligrams of masteron, and 300 milligrams of nandrolone. I accidentally got someone pregnant once, and this was like a fucking horrible situation. This was way back in the day, and that then ended up, being when I was on cycle. So obviously things didn't work out. That's a whole other story for a different day, but it does work every time. And I love HCG on cycle. That's why it happened. I find HCG to be one of the best compounds you can pair with pretty much any anabolic, but that's a story for a different day. Ian Tortolis. I hope I'm saying that right. Sorry, bro. Do you have any experience or knowledge using Retatrutide? I know what you're talking about. It's just hard to say. Retatrutide sounds like I can't say it on YouTube. During a hard cutting phase, I'm curious as to how well it compares to other GLP-1 drugs. Not much user information out there besides Reddit fatties. So theoretically, right, it should have a pretty equivalent effect. In all honesty, it should have a pretty equivalent effect. There's not, like, on paper much differences between the two. I would argue that in my personal experience with GLP-1 agonists, the best has been the oh Jesus Christ, there's so many now. I'm forgetting what's trizepatide. For me, trizepatide has been the most tried and true with blunting appetite and consistently doing so, even in so usually what you find is like people will lose sensitivity to these compounds and then increase the dose over a certain X period of time. And especially as the caloric intake goes down, the dose needs to come up. What I found with trizepatide is that you can pretty much stick it in and it just stays consistent the whole fucking time. No issues, right? Like zero fucking issues. So that's my preference in terms of what I've used. I've actually not used retatrutide, so I can't say with confidence personally how it's affected me. I will say with a lot of GLP-1 agonists, though, I've really thoroughly not enjoyed the nausea and sort of upset stomach feelings they provide. And with trizepatide, I've not had that. So just my 2 cents. I've not actually had personal experience with this one. What's up, bro? Appreciate you coming in. Joshua Perry trying to be good. Your wife's sister, right now, yeah, and the lady boys out back. Nick P, just seen a podcast of coaches that work with pros talking about going cold turkey with PEDs multiple times a year. Yeah, it is. And I've talked about it before. I'd love to, if you could send me that podcast, by the way, like offline, or if you want to join the Discord and throw it in the general chat, I would love you forever, because this is the kind of stuff I can make YouTube content with and educate you guys more. But basically, yes, that's terrible. And we know, like, very clearly, because we have decades and decades of research with testosterone therapies, that when you let a male go intentionally gonadal, or just like void or hypo testosterone, right? Like he doesn't have enough testosterone in his serum. It is much, much, much worse for their cognitive function and cardiovascular function than being at a upper to normal physiological range of testosterone. So what you end up doing, right, is like this awful roller coaster where you're blasting gear, and you're causing a lot of cardiovascular detriments, cardiometabolic detriments, and neurological detriments. Then you come back down, and ultimately you're back in the same boat. You've gone cold turkey. You're back in the same fucking boat. You're in the area of exposure to high degrees of risk in cardiomortality, and high degrees of risk in neurological down regulation, whatever you'd like to call it. It's a bad situation on both worlds. There's no reason someone should go cold turkey. I think that theoretically, the best outcome for a person would be to blast and cruise, as we've been doing for years. I know that there's old school heads that typically do the going cold turkey or whatever. It just doesn't make sense. It's probably why their brains are all fucking mush at this point, because it's just nonsensical. It's more detrimental for your health. It's the least effective way to recover from a high anabolic load. The best effective way to recover would be to get your testosterone back at the upper end of physiological range, and then work on the things that you need to work on, not completely bottom it out and feel like shit, and then, be the depressed piece of shit that eats McDonald's every day. Like, this isn't going to help. Thanks, Nick, for sending that to me. Liam, have you made a video going in depth about your cerebral palsy and how it affects your bodybuilding and daily life? If not, do you mind discussing it? Yeah. I mean, I can. It's not something like I love talking about, to be honest, because it's a difficult situation, because it's something that, like, personally is quite debilitating, and it's something I don't like to admit to. I don't necessarily acknowledge it every day, right? Like, I'm pretty confident in the way I move and how I can handle myself within the gym, and even in, like, Muay Thai, for example, with cerebral palsy. But there's always the inability that sneaks up on you and really, like, lets you know it's there. So it affects my bodybuilding in a lot of ways, right? So, like, my legs, my right hip is like this. So my right hip's down here, my left hip is up here. So inevitably, you can imagine, like, what that's doing to my spine is this, essentially, right? So, like, the bottom of my spine, that lower lumbar, is like this. So I can never really create a lot of axial loading, like squatting patterns, right? That spine is kind of constantly in that sort of tilted pattern like this, which is not good. What's up, Adam? Hold on. Let's get Adam in here. Hey, Adam.
Hey. Oh, what's up, dude?
Not much. I'm just palsy. So my spine's like this, right? So I can't axially load a ton, which sucks. And then there's also, what cerebral palsy is generally like a neurological disorder, and it's at birth. Usually it happens at birth. It's not all the time, but it happens at birth for most people, where they're deprived of oxygen for a certain amount of time, and then there's like a little small portion of neurological tissue that dies, right? My small portion was kind of like back here in the left hemisphere of my brain, sort of like literally in the back, which controls the right side of the body. Now, thankfully, it was such a small piece, and I was only devoid of oxygen for a little bit. Very few parts of my body don't work except my right leg. So my ability to feel and connect with the muscle tissue is significantly diminished by, like, a large margin. So it's much harder for me to do things like leg movements in a like, let's just say, bilateral situation, where, let's just say, I'm doing free weight squats, which I love to do, but I can't necessarily feel what I'm doing with my right leg, nor can I, like, actively think about what muscles I'm engaging as I'm going through the range of motion on the squat. So it just makes building legs in particular extremely hard. and creating stability within squatting patterns really hard more than anything. I'd say on my daily life, it doesn't really affect shit. I pretty much get along just fine with it. Like I have a small limp, and Adam can probably attest to that, but it's not like I'm not like fucking, peg legging this shit with a crate cane or anything. There's a ton of people who are way worse than I am, which is like, I'm super fortunate for that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't affect me too much in terms of daily living. So yeah, that's my sob story done.
So that's quite interesting, because I'll say one of your stronger body parts are legs. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah. I think like my quads are really strong. And I think, interestingly enough, I think that my stimulus to fatigue ratio is a lot lower on my like cerebral palsy legs. So like I can get a lot more stimulus out of a lot less training on my right leg. So it's like, whereas my left requires, because it's completely normal, it might require more volume and or intensity. My right leg, the cerebral palsy one, could be, fried after 4 reps on the leg press, and then the other one's still going. So yeah. Find it hard to believe they get natty levels with their breaks. Oh yeah. We were talking about basically how this guy saw a podcast where essentially they were talking about going cold turkey with PEDs multiple times a year. Yeah. And I talked about like how that's kind of counterproductive, because you're just getting the worst of both worlds.
Yes.
Like literally the worst outcome, like neurologically speaking and cardiovascularly.
And
speaking.
if I recall, I don't know if it was Jay Cutler, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I do remember a couple similar podcasts like this where they say, "Oh yeah, we take off like December, we take off 4 weeks," and it's like, dude, if you're running like high dose of equipoise, like it's gonna be in your system the entire time.
Yeah.
So you're not really taking
on
a break.
Yeah,
exactly. So I think a lot of them with these shorter breaks, you basically, as you said, you're running 2 to 4 grams out. So you're basically just dropping the dose to where you probably are on TRT by the end of it, by the time the drugs clear your system, and then you're hopping back on. So yeah, not really doing anything.
Yeah, which I think Chase Irons actually does this, or he did it last time. Like he took 8 weeks of a break, and he just didn't pin anything because he was like sick of pinning 5 mLs a day with the shit. And but for him, like that's, he's still on by the end of that for sure. So it's like he realizes that it's not necessarily like he comes off cold turkey. In reality, it's just sort of like, I think people might say something that they don't necessarily interpret as what's actually happening. Maybe. Is Nandrolone obsolete, or do you see a place for it in a cycle? What do you think, Adam?
I think it's not obsolete. There are some specific use cases. You also got to remember, like, everyone seems to respond to drugs in a different manner. Like the amount of clients that we've had where it's like some people aromatize, some people don't aromatize, some people get anxiety, some people get hair loss, etc. So you're basically trying to find what side effects that they can tolerate, you don't want. So I've used Nandrolone in a few settings. So this one is a bit contentious, and I don't know if it's had a benefit, but we know that when you use Nandrolone, you get enhanced water. You get enhanced water retention sometimes around the joints. You have like synovial fluid in the joints, and sometimes you can get a little bit of enhanced water retention. I've seen with clients where they complain about joint issues, and don't get me wrong, we still attacking these joint issues with like checking their technique, doing physiotherapy if required, peptide therapy at BBC 157 and TU500 if required. But sometimes as a last resort, I'll be like, okay, let's try 70 milligrams of Nandrolone a week and see if that fluid retention around the joints actually helps cushion the joints. I know it doesn't heal them, but cushion the joints just make training that much easier. And a few times I've had it with clients where they take just 70 milligrams of Nandrolone, like, oh, my joints actually feel great. And we're able to train quite well. So I kind of use it in that method. I haven't had anyone as of yet who just responds really well to Nandrolone, and that becomes their main anabolic that we push. But those are the specific cases I use it. But the second case would be, if someone like responds really well to it, they don't get anxiety or any other negative side effects associated with it. But to be honest, that group I think is quite small. So not obsolete, but I think very specific.
Yeah. I love it in certain contexts, but it's honestly like, it's one of the ones that it's almost crossed off my list of personal use things at this point, just because of the neurological effects of 19-or testosterones don't look so hot on paper. And it's something that, like, we've talked about this before, like even when I'm using Tren, I'll use it at 70 milligrams at most. I don't feel like going above that is worth it for me anymore. So I wouldn't say it's obsolete, but that's too objective. But I would say it's probably not the first thing we're picking off the shelf most of the time, especially in Like I would say, as Adam was saying, like someone who responds well to it. To me, like I think of a really lengthy, tall white guy who just doesn't have filled out body parts, who could use that like
Yes.
little bit of retention just to sort of help him fill out. I think that's a really good tool in the tool case. And maybe that would help him, for example, like improve his pressing movements or his squatting patterns, because he does have like those longer femurs and the longer humerus. So like he's generally weaker. It could be more beneficial in those instances, but even then it's like the neurological shit I don't want to really fuck with too much.
Yeah, I agree.
Nick P might be dumb, but if someone has low testosterone, estrogen, and etc., so I'm assuming just all hormones, is there a chance they can also have low IGF-1? Absolutely. Yeah. Adam, you want to go for it? We probably
Yeah, I was going to say they're not mutually exclusive. So yes, these hormones can affect one another, but you can 100% have low estrogen from a multitude of reasons, like crushing estrogen with DHT derivatives, AI, okay, and so on and so forth. And then IGF-1, well, as you all know, if you can get a poor sleep and affect your IGF-1 levels, okay. God forbid you have any sort of like tumors or anything like that, but that can also affect your IGF-1 production, and it affects your pituitary gland. So yeah, most definitely. Without you giving us specific information about like we are running this, therefore this could be low. Long story short, not mutually exclusive, and yes, they can both be low.
Yeah, and typically estradiol limits the low estradiol limits the conversion of growth hormone into IGF-1. So
yes, that's it.
Applicably, that would also cause low IGF-1. But generally speaking, I guess those would kind of trend together. But I've also seen weird cases like Chase Irons again, who has indiscriminately low IGF-1, and he's taking fucking copious amounts of growth hormone. So it's it's kind of at the end of the day.
Yeah, we think we just discussed it last time. Was the difference between systemic IGF-1 and localized IGF-1 in the muscle? And Chase obviously have a shitload in the muscle, but maybe systemically, for whatever reason, it's not there.
Right. Bingo. Atlas Shrugged asks, in what context would you use MK677? What do you
think? I personally wouldn't actually use it. Yeah. If someone does not have access to exogenous growth hormone and they have they can't get it, sure, then I would use a growth hormone secretagogue. But if they have access to actual exogenous GH, I wouldn't use a growth hormone secretagogue. The only other context I would use it if someone is really struggling with appetite, and I'm just using it basically to boost their appetite as the side effect there. But then I also have to control blood glucose. For whatever reason, I've run with a few clients, but it does seem to push up blood glucose, at least in my experience, quite a fair bit, which became a bit of a pain in the ass to manage alongside being in a caloric surplus, alongside using GH. GH, I find, actually push up blood glucose far less than MK677, I find, on blood work. So it was a benefit of having that increase in appetite, but then it was a bit of a pain in the ass to deal with the blood glucose. So basically, either to stimulate appetite or as a last resort because they don't have access to GH.
Yeah, I agree. I think to stimulate appetite is probably the biggest reason that I would use it. And I guess, the same use cases that you provided. If someone was completely unable to acquire growth hormone, then MK677 would be the next pick. But it's like, it's not really like my consideration. I don't think about using it most of the time. I just think about applying growth hormone if we can, for whoever we're working with. I'm actually curious on your, I had a good question and I'm curious on your answer to it. I basically, as a preface, my answer was like, hey, I've experienced getting people pregnant on grams of gear, especially with just even monotherapy of HCG. What are your thoughts? If he was to increase the dose of testosterone, taking FSH and HCG concurrently, would that impact his fertility metrics while on those medications?
So yes and no. I definitely agree with you. I've had multiple clients and friends and colleagues get their respective partner pregnant whilst on higher dose cycles. But then on the other hand, I've also had guys who I've helped with for literal months we had to drop to TRT. Then from TRT, we actually PCT'd off, restored their natural fertility, and then they only got pregnant. To us, there was only 2 cases. So the majority of them actually got pregnant on cycle. And that's why I say it really depends on your individual fertility markers. So now, okay, to be fair, most of these guys didn't test their fertility markers before coming to me. It's more so like, oh, dude, what do I do now? I'm like, oh, fuck it.
Yeah.
Let's come up with something. But long story short, I guess it depends on like, what are your goals? Like, are you trying to get pregnant like right now? Or is this something where you just try and there's no real time frame and you don't mind? Because you can definitely increase the dose of increase your cycle and just respectively maybe increase the fertility drugs. But I will say you are decreasing your probability of, falling pregnant. Is it not going to happen? No, I'm not saying that. But it depends on your individual fertility markers, response to the drugs, and like, I guess, again, what's your time frame of trying? So if you said to me, Adam, I really want to get my partner pregnant right now, I would probably tell you to drop to a true TRT dose, like 150, 125 milligrams of test a week, let that come down. Then use things like HCG. You've mentioned FHS or recombinant FSH, maybe recombinant LH. I actually quite like HMG, which I find the more potent form of HCG. I think that works quite well. And basically, I would be trialing that until your partner becomes pregnant. On the off chance that even TRT is messing with the fertility parameters, obviously after actually getting your sperm tested, then I would maybe suggest, okay, we have to PCT off. I only really had to do it with one guy, and mainly because he wanted to, not because I was saying, oh, you have to PCT off. He was just like, oh, I want to, restore our natural fertility. So I was like, okay, cool. But yeah, dude, long story short, yes, but it depends on your goals and how quickly you want to fall pregnant.
Right. That's a good point. And one thing I forgot to mention is like any amount of super physiological androgen generally increases like localized oxidative stress in the testicles. So if you do scale gear high enough that oxidation,
you'll get a girl.
You'll likely get a girl. At some point, there was going to be a girl at the end of all this. So unfortunately, so that's all the live questions we have at the moment. I went through a bunch before you got here. I did have a question. I have a lot of questions actually from the Discord and as well other things. So one person had asked, because I did a little bit of a trial with different oral steroids. Basically, I tried the Winstrol, I tried Anavar, and I tried Anadrol all this past 3 weeks. Each at the Anavar and Winstrol at 100 milligrams, the Anadrol at 200 milligrams. I found the Anadrol to be probably like the most effective in terms of building long-term reoccurring strength output. And I found the Anavar to be most beneficial in terms of like just skin splitting gnarly fucking pumps. And the Winstrol was kind of like meh for me. But what out of all those, what do you see as the best for your use cases? I know we don't love to use oral compounds often, but like what would you deploy most often? Well, even throwing ball on the table.
Yeah, well, see, it depends on what can we define the use case. Are we looking for it? Because we coach strength athletes, we coach strongmen, I guess somewhat hybrid, powerlifters, bodybuilders. Are we talking about bodybuilding, or are we talking about a broad way of athletes? Where's this guy?
Yeah, let's say globally bodybuilding, because that's most of the people who are in the Discord.
Yeah, okay, then that would change the answer quite a fair bit. So globally bodybuilding, I personally would go for Anavar simply because I don't really care about strength when it comes to bodybuilding. Like, don't get me wrong, we all like to lift heavy weights, but we talk about a fair bit. We talk about stimulus and how much stimulus we can recover from it. Stimulus is not necessarily just the load, okay? It's my repetitions you're doing. It's the exercise execution, like time of attention, intensity techniques. All these things can contribute to stimulus you get in a workout, and can you recover from it? So I'm looking to maximize that stimulus and not necessarily just do the heaviest fucking weight possible. So I personally find, in terms of side effects, I find Anavar typically the best, or at least benign when it comes to side effects. Following second from that, I find actually Turinabol pretty good in terms of side effect profile. Now, I know it's quite uncommon. A lot of people don't like it, but those are my rank 1 and 2. Now, Winstrol, I personally find, unless in a contest prep setting, a bit of an inferior version of Anavar. I find it gives similar, I guess, cosmetic effects, but of the additional side effect that most people get really sore joints and a lot of like really sore back pumps from it, or low back pumps, or just basically a lot of cramping from it. So I usually find that Winstrol, like, we increase electrolytes, taurine, and water a fair bit of it, but it's having a similar effect to Anavar. So I'm like, just use the Anavar. Then in terms like the Anabol and Anadrol, man, I've found like a lot of people do initially respond well to it. So a lot, as you mentioned, the profile of the skinnier, taller white guy who struggles to put on weight, like those are like the candidates for that. But then the problem comes in, well, if it starts affecting the appetite, fuck. If it starts affecting your blood pressure, fuck. All these things, you know, liver and kidney markers, fuck. So that's why it's like, it doesn't make sense long term, at least with the guys I coach. So usually a low dose of Anavar is the way to go, or Turinabol. And then I usually, as we discussed last time, right, what are you looking to get out of this? Because are you looking to use it as your primary anabolic? I'd probably like, no. Are you using it to increase training performance? Then I'd be like, okay, again, I think the trade-off you get with Anavar or Turinabol is far better than what you get from Nandrolone. Yeah, will you have better training performance with Nandrolone? Yeah, probably. Will you be stronger? Yeah, probably. Okay. But the ability to use that long term, I think it's greatly diminished with the side effect profile. Unless you're that one freak who just pops 50 milligrams of Anadrol and just gets all the benefits from it. I haven't met that person yet. Maybe they do exist. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's kind of how I would rank them.
Yeah. I think that's pretty accurate. I think Anavar's, man, like the tough thing is Kurt's been putting out some information saying that's very conflicting with oral compounds, and some of it's not really based in like foundational science, I would say. Like human application, long-term anabolic users, that kind of thing. I made a whole video about Turinabol, talking about all the data I could find on it, the history of it, where it was applied in use, and like how it was put in 10,000 German athletes as sort of like an experiment of just catastrophe proportions. But same thing with Anavar. He's talked about it being something that causes cancer, and I don't see why that would be theoretically compared to other anabolics in general. So I would generally say that most are going to be fine in oral compounds. I would think Anavar is probably the most, in terms of like safety profile. It's definitely going to be the one that's going to be the biggest bang for your buck, and that you can probably use for the longest period of time, and then also get the most. Look, if I'm to compare the three compounds that I used, the middle ground is Anavar, between getting like an exceptional increase in performance, but also like a huge perceived increase in like perceived muscle control, which I think is, we talked about this before, but that's like not really a quantifiable thing that people talk about, but it's massive. It does matter a ton when you can feel and control the muscles that you're contracting and stuff. So I consider that to be like a big plus behind it for sure. Atlas Shrugged says, my diet consists of lean protein and rice, potatoes, and oatmeal for carbs. Very low fats. What would you suggest I add to my meals to make sure I'm getting adequate micronutrients? A lot. So for me, like I'm pretty diversified when I create meal plans. I think a lot of my clients could attest to this. I include a lot of things like raw cheese or hard cheese. I like to try to get calcium, and I include a lot of Greek yogurts. I include, for meats, you know, some of my clients, like I have Andrew, who's on prep right now, and I think he only has 1 or maybe 0 meals with chicken in it. It's all like beef, top sirloin, wild caught salmon, mackerel, things like this. So I try to stay away from like the standardized, if you can afford it, the standardized chicken and rice. And I try to have people err more towards, you know, eating meats that are rich in micronutrients, like wild caught salmon, like your red meats that you can still get just as lean as chicken. And Adam had, you know, kangaroo meat when he was in Australia, which also had a like pretty good fucking net nutrient profile and was just as lean as chicken. So, yeah, that's the one thing I would add, is just diversify your meats. I would say that the carbohydrates are generally fine. I would try to maybe throw in like different forms of rice, which is something I also prefer. You know, there's tons of different grains, but just like, you know, a serving of wild rice mixed in with your white rice can be something that, 1, decreases the glycemic index of the white rice, but 2, can add more of a nutrient profile to your white rice, which is virtually void of any.
Yeah, I'll just go with the simple addition, which is just fruits and vegetables, dude. So we know fructose can help with carbohydrate metabolism and upregulation of that. So I would just add either fruit or vegetable to each meal. Like, you know, I get lazy. I get basically the bags of shredded vegetables, like stir fry mix. I just dump it into every meal.
Yeah.
Or I just get some sort of fructose. Like I like pineapple. It has bromelain. Supposedly helps with protein digestion. usually when I'm surplus, I'm eating so much, I don't really notice the difference. But I put it in there in the hope that helps digestion. And then the other thing, which is less so micronutrient dense, although a lot of them are like fermented foods, so things that can help digestion. So kefir can help with that. Kimchi, sauerkraut, pickles, things like that. So often they do have a fair bit of micronutrients and also can help with digestion. That's typically how we make our meal plans. Like, one, it must be hitting the macro targets. Two, you must actually want to eat it. Three, must have good digestion. Four, must have good micronutrients. And that's how we devise a meal plan. So I think it's, I would argue, better than the standard. Here's your chicken rice, fuck off. So that's what we consider when we're making meal plans. And I can't stress enough, you must enjoy it, because if you someone who I fucking hate this meal, you're not going to eat it every day for 12 months straight. So I just think, find stuff you like that has good micronutrients, correct, put into Chronometer, and look at the diet's profile and see if it's good, and then just go from there.
Yeah, and I would argue too, that's a very valid point, because I've had salmon in people's diets before, and it's just some people just absolutely fucking despise fish, and they just can't eat it. And if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. We just have to find a different circuit. There's always going to be a way to circumvent some nutrient deficiency with another food that you could move into linearly from the other food. So absolutely. Sebastian, it is definitely optimal, but you have to ask more questions too. So hope your training goes well as well, man. He's been fucking injured left, right, and center, and sick. And this dude is a soy boy of all degrees. He's fucking always injured. Yeah. So, and I would say,
sorry.
No, you go.
I was gonna say, I interpreted that the other way. I was like, is he asking us to do a live stream whilst training?
Yeah. I will say, this guy said use Chronometer to input your diet. It tells you micronutrients you're taking. Yes, that is a very healthy and accurate tool. I like it. You can also do things like see your Cerebral score, which is the acidity of your diet, and a couple other variables like your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, your copper to magnesium intake, things like this that are really kind of not necessarily of most importance for a lot of people, but do matter in the long run. It's good. And you can also see your ratio of sodium to potassium, which is a really big one for bodybuilders, because that's a really great way to modulate heart rate, blood pressure, various different things. So, it's a great app. But shoot, man. All right, let me look on Discord really quick. Hold on. Let's see what else other people have asked. There's Discord's popping off, which I appreciate you guys, by the way. Thank you so much for jumping on. So someone asked, and I think it's very valid, what tattoos do in respects to bodybuilding competitions? Do they aid or not aid you, essentially, when it comes to judging? And I would say, very clearly, I'm pretty lean right now, and I don't look lean. You can't see leanness from my arm because it's covered in black, or there's just you don't see cuts or striations or anything there, where normally you can see the feathering in my triceps or up here. So there's definitely an impairment. There's a reason that Lee Priest got a lot of his covered up with tans when he was doing his competing, and a lot of people do that. Honestly, it's pretty shit in terms of judging, because it covers up a lot of the detail in someone's body and body composition. I don't find it doesn't make me look smaller. It's just that my leanness is less perceived by someone looking in, even on my chest and stuff. So that's what I'd say about it.
Yeah, I have to agree. It really depends on where you have the tattoos, how they're tattooed, how tattooed are you. I would say in general, I mean, look at all the top bodybuilders. Most of them have smaller tattoos, simply because it's less distracting from the physique. Can you still get do well with tattoos? Yes, absolutely. And also, I even see now that there's tanning options where they are able to mask the tattoos. So that's interesting. I'd probably try that on myself. But for the most part, if you want to get to the Olympia, probably don't get a full body tattoo. If you are someone who is a competitive bodybuilder, I would say just think a little bit about it, because as Colin said, it can sometimes hide definition. So, but again, Colin, if you went and tanned, right, and you put on that, it's basically almost like makeup on your tattoos, you'll be able to see that definition. So thankfully, we have technology to sort of circumvent that. But genuinely, I would be don't reach piano yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And it's tough too, because even the cover up tattoo that, or the cover up tan that will cover up tattoos, it's more like I've felt it before. Like someone who had it on, I was like, dude, you can, like, it's like muddy. It's like kind of clayish.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that can in and of itself cover up definition within a body part if
Correct.
it's too thick, you know.
Correct.
So it becomes a
Mm-hmm.
tricky situation of like what's best for me in this moment. And sometimes that's
Mm-hmm.
just going to be getting a really dark tattoo or a dark tan at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have another question from a Discord member. Ever since I've came off cycle, I started my health phase. I've had problems with sleep, maybe 3 to 4 hours a night, and I'm still tired, but I just can't stay asleep. I didn't used to have insomnia, and I've tried melatonin, weed, and ZQL. Just not sure what might be causing this. What are your thoughts?
Sorry, you cut out there. What was that last bit?
Sorry. What are your thoughts? I was just curious on your thoughts, or if you caught it all.
No, so I didn't catch the first part. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Oh, the
So
question.
yeah. So basically he came off cycle, entered a
Yes.
health phase, and
Mm-hmm.
inevitably what happened was since then he's been unable to sleep for more than 3 to 4 hours. He sort of wakes up with a feeling of like ready to go and basically having insomnia. He's tried
Mm-hmm.
ZQL, melatonin, and a couple different things. Hasn't really seen a resolution yet. What
Okay.
could be, and this is something that I personally struggle with quite a bit, honestly, but just at large, like all the time. What are your thoughts?
Well, thoughts are I would like see if we can. So you went from basically blasting. What were the compounds he was taking?
Just testosterone, and let me look just to be sure. Yeah, just testosterone
And
at
how
a high
long has he
dose.
said it? How long has he been off it, so to speak, or how long he's been on the health base?
He doesn't say, unfortunately.
Okay. I mean, it can be a multitude of things, right? You know, I've seen clients who, because of life stresses, have cortisol levels through the roof, and this is causing them. To be honest, that usually prevents them from getting to sleep, as well as having sleep disruption. So I've had clients who almost had adrenal fatigue just because of life circumstances that they're going through whilst trying to bodybuild, and we just had to try and manage cortisol levels because they were just running rampant and. Basically, it was preventing or inhibiting their sleep. In which case, there I was actually looking at a combination of ashwagandha and CBD oil. I know a lot of people like ashwagandha, but at the same time, I find it not super potent. So that's why I like to do a combination with CBD oil to try to get them to sleep, as well as look at obviously their sleep hygiene practices. Then again, my other question would be to just tick with the boxes like, do you take ADHD medication? Do you use things like modafinil? What is your caffeine intake like? How close to caffeine are you how close to bed time are you consuming caffeine? What does your sleep routine look like? So I'd first have to look at those things to assume that is in place. If all those are optimal, then I would honestly just get blood work and try to see, you know, what is there anything on the blood work that might indicate to me, okay, maybe that is disrupting sleep. A simple thing which I found with a lot of clients aiding with sleep is literally taking a moderate to higher dose of growth hormone. Like genuinely, I've stopped using melatonin by just using like above 5 IUs of GH. It just knocks me out. I don't know. So I find using that can assist a fair bit. And then also like your disruption to your sleep. Again, are you finding you urinating frequently and outside? I'd have to piece together all this information to try to troubleshoot what it specifically is, because I've had a client before where it's a bit frustrating actually, where we were like looking over all the different sleep parameters, and then they were like, oh yeah, by the way, like I also like consume a fair bit like caffeine and then take ADHD meds, and I'm like, oh fuck, there you go. There you go. That would be affecting it a fair bit. So yeah, I would have to check all that off first. But if it's just like a health phase, you've done all of that and nothing, I would just say get a comprehensive blood work panel and see if there's anything there that we can look into.
Yeah, I would say that too. I would say let's see what's going on hormonally. Maybe you have deficiencies within neurosteroids like DHEA, which is DHEA itself is a central nervous system depressant. So taking that before bed can generally be helpful too, if that is just defining you. To me, honestly, like I have these issues. I've had them my whole life. Like I can sleep for maybe 5 hours and I just generally wake up ready to go. I think Adam's pretty much similar in this sense too, where like I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the androgens, maybe it's, you know, the something else. I don't know. It could be so many different things. Not really found a solution. Even when I take medications like Trazodone or fucking even like sedatives that they use during surgeries, like it's still not really, doesn't keep me out.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The one thing I will say is, and I've had people come to that same conclusion as you, where it's like I can't sleep, and then we ask like, what's going on? Oh, do you drink caffeine? Well, I drink a couple coffees. How many do you drink? And it's like fucking literally six coffees. It's equivalent of like 1,000 some milligrams of caffeine. It's like, when do you stop? Well, like 4 p.m. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ, dude. People don't realize like caffeine has like about an 11-hour half-life. Like it's still in your system at bedtime if you're drinking it that late. So that's a big one. But also I find that a lot of people, when they come off cycle, they'll offset that feeling of being off with stimulants, like you said, like modafinil, Adderall, high doses of caffeine, things of that nature, sort of get that extra edge again in the gym when they walk in, that aggression. And that over a long period of time, obviously you can become a little bit less stimulated by the same doses of whatever compound you're taking. So you need to take more, and then it just kind of compiles onto this really negative outcome where you're constantly in that sympathetic drive where it's just like you can't calm down, and then you go to bed like that. Usually what I see is that when people wake up early and they're not able to go back to sleep, there's still a stimulant in their system of some kind. But
yep. Yeah. So there's a long list of stuff we would troubleshoot. I mean, I've even had guys who tell me like it's silly, but like generally scroll on their phones a fair bit on like social media before bed. And I generally think that's like one of the worst things you can do, besides like stimulating your brain with, I would argue, pretty garbage content. Yes, even if it's my stupid stuff. You don't want to be doing that prior to bed, and that can seriously disrupt your sleep. So we'd probably go through like a checklist of what all these factors can do, because it's really a process of elimination, right? And often sometimes it's multifactorial. It's two different things or multiple things are affecting it. Go through that checklist and then try to troubleshoot what it is. I mean, shit, you could be big enough that you need a CPAP. I don't know. Maybe you find that, you know, you wake up in your sleep because you're losing oxygen. Like I've had a client that transpired before. So yeah, dude, I wish I could give you a straightforward answer, but like with most of these questions, it's a fuck off long list of it depends.
That's sadly kind of how it goes. Atlas Shrug asks, do y'all supplement with zinc? Pros and cons. I think majority of people supplement with zinc. The pros are, you want to take zinc picolinate. The pros are that generally when you're on androgens, you deplete these specific micronutrients and minerals much more rapidly. So your daily requirements may come up compared to that of a general population folk. So it's almost a requirement to supplement with it to some capacity as well. It really aids in transitioning into slow wave sleep, especially when paired with magnesium. So
yep,
that's my, and the cons, it costs money.
It's like $9 a bottle. Like, yeah. So I would agree, worth it.
Yeah, I would take it at night. You'll be good. Sebastian asks, you think there'll be a point in time where doing cycles rather than BSing will totally die out? Rather than bodybuilding, maybe? Is that what he's saying?
Wait, do you think there'll be a point in time where doing cycles, so in other words, cycle or PCT off, rather than blasting and cruising?
Oh, I see.
Are you saying cycles dying out over blasting and cruising?
Probably not.
Yeah, I think there's still people fucking taking just D-bar only. And doing all sorts of wild shit. I do think that definitely things have definitely leaned to the blast and cruise quote unquote approach. I do know, I mean, shit, I've been doing this 15 years now. I'm not taking PDs 15 years, been bodybuilding for 15 years. And I remember back in the day on all the forums, it was very heavily cycle-based approach. You know, time on, time off, go PCT after every approach. And then also a lot of the pros were not as transparent. And then obviously people in the know or people realize these motherfuckers are never coming off. Like, you're not putting Olympia level physiques coming off. And then as this information has become more widespread and filtered down to the general populace, now people are realizing, or not now, but like people have realized over the years, oh shit, you kind of need to be on the whole time to an extent if you want like an elite level physique. Although I would argue there are some elite level physiques who do a cycle approach, but they're very long cycles. But anyway, I think everyone has leaned towards that that side anyway. So much so that, to answer your question, Sebastian, I think to an extent it has kind of died out. I mean, I still have conversations with people going like, I'm going to do 8 weeks of 500 tests, 300, and then I'll have a conversation and be like, why you want to do that, blah, blah, blah. And then usually it ends up in a different approach. But I would say for the majority, most of my conversations are with guys talking about a blast and a cruise approach. So much so, I don't even really call it a blast and cruise approach. It's just how we approach PEDs. If you are looking to be a competitive bodybuilder, you go through push-up phases or surplus phases or proven phases, what you want to call it. Then you have health phases, which is just a term for taking less shit to try to restore health markers, and then rinse and repeat, really. I don't think any of my clients really do cycles because, as we've sort of discussed before, the difficulty and detrimental effects of restarting, your HPT axis is quite taxing on the body. So I would say max you want to do that once per year. You can't be doing that 2-3 times per year. I honestly think that's going to be far more detrimental than just staying on and going to a lower dose. So I would say, maybe to an extent it's start out.
Yeah, I would agree. The only thing is, like, when there's old people that sort of resonate these old beliefs with new clients, that's when you get into this dangerous area. So, like, you've probably seen this guy on most probably everyone has seen this guy once or twice on their like Instagram algorithm. John Anderson, he's like this old gearhead, talks some good stuff, but recently exactly. I recently had one of his clients come over to me, and I saw the protocols, and it was basically blasting and cruising, testosterone, Nandrolone, a DHT, and then coming off and then cleaning out with like Clomid and all these shits. So it's still a very real thing in some circles. And I think like in places like Thailand, where the coaches are Thai and they've not, expanded beyond that Thai reach, certainly still a thing. Like they're 20, 30 years in the past with that kind of stuff, unfortunately. But for most people in the know, I think it's like, why are you fucking doing that? Don't be an idiot. It's like,
I don't, anyone somewhat educated, I don't think, ask me what my cycle is. It's usually like, what are you currently taking?
Yeah. What are you currently running? Exactly. It's fucking funny. Who you with asks, hi, I was on 400 tests, 400 EQ, 16 weeks, finished blood work. Everything is perfect except high test and free test. Can I start another cycle in 4 weeks right now? I'm on 250 tests a week cruise. So
there's a cycle question.
The high test and free test, that's definitely due to running 250 tests. So that's like, beyond needs for most people. You're going to be usually at the highest end or above the highest end of the physiological range at that dose. So that's why 16 weeks. Okay, but how long were you off? That's what I guess is the important question. So generally, this is how I handle it. And it's hard to know without having your like biological passport, where we can see like historically what was your labs, currently what are your labs, that kind of thing. Where are they trending? What I generally tell people, though, and almost all the time with 100% certainty, is if your labs look good and we're doing, maybe yearly or bi-yearly or biannually organ imaging, and everything's good, like specifically your labs, then it's like, why stop? Just keep going. If we're starting to see, like, let's just say we get 3 labs pulled, and we get over those 3 labs that were pulled over, let's just say a 24-week period, the trend is coming down and you've been on cycle that entire period. All right, then we might have something to say like, okay, we're trending downwards. We're slowly getting very deranged here with certain labs. Let's consider planning our, lowering the dose, cleaning out a little bit, recovering those health markers before cruising back up to the, prerequisite dose for you to sustain, significant results. He's been off for 2 weeks. So in that case, that's pretty short. You're still on everything. Yeah, you're still on everything. Generally, I would say that yeah, I mean, you're still on cycle. I would say that you could keep going if there's no big concerns. If nothing's even in the red, then I'm like, all right, well, that's probably generally fine. I can't give you like a clean certificate to say like Colton said you can run cycle because I don't know the whole picture. But generally, if I have a client that presents to me with like really good lab work and they're still on cycle and they've been on cycle for 20 weeks, I'm going to say, let's do another 4 and see what happens. Let's do another 6, see what happens. And we go from there. That's generally how I handle it. But 2 weeks is you're still on cycle.
Yeah, exactly. Completely agree. I mean, the decanate ester and boldenone is going to last, or equal point is going to last quite some time. And as Shade M said, it takes a while to saturate, I believe, even from the 4 to 5+ week mark. I go double 48 days or 45 days, if I remember, on the decanate ester. It doesn't mean it's not working, but to reach that peak dosage. And as Colton was saying, right, as we've probably said a million times before, like, what are your goals? What are you trying to get out of bodybuilding? But if you're trying to get the biggest muscular physique possible, I'm going to come up with one of my stupid analogies here, but think of, I don't know, you're in a car and your car is trying to go as far as possible. Does it require maintenance? I.e., have you done your blood work? And is the fucking fuel light on? Are a bunch of health markers off? If they are off, as like Colton said, yeah, we scale back to a TRT phase, address them, wait the requisite period of time, which can vary depending on what health markers are and what we need to improve, get follow-up blood work, make sure we're in the clear, and then resume, or rather start scaling dosages again. So as you said, you said everything's in the middle of the range. So I'm going to assume that's in range, because middle of the range can be off for certain health markers. But I'm going to assume that in range, it means everything is in range, in which case you can probably just continue onwards until you start seeing certain health markers degrade. Like, with equipoise, we know they can stimulate, red blood cell production a fair bit. Hematocrit can go high, which is not necessarily a bad thing, But if you're starting to get, like in my case, when I was less educated, nosebleeds, high blood pressure, you need to do something about that. Now, you don't necessarily need to stop or go off cycle, but you need to do most things to address that, whether it be like therapeutic phlebotomies, blood donations, taking IP6 to reduce red blood cell production, things like that. But yeah, basically, if you're fine, continue onwards. There's no need to stop. And also, because you're using such a long ester, dude, you would have to be cruising for a significant period of time to let boldenone clear your system if you're getting detrimental side effects from it. So yeah, take that into consideration.
Yeah, easily like 2 to possibly even a third month in there to clear out completely. And there's some evidence that suggests that the metabolites of boldenone don't even clear out for years, but that's
yes.
Sebastian asks, how long are the resting heart rate benefits of cardio supposed to last? Because I could swear the day or 2 after cardio, my morning readings looked better, but it doesn't really last. Could be other factors though. It's a unique question. Readings?
Huh? He's talking about specific resting heart rate readings?
Yeah. So usually he sits at like 70s, 80s, like unmedicated, even 90s. So when he did cardio, it went down shockingly down to like the 70s and almost breached the 60s and stuff. So I think what he's asking is like, because of that cardio bout, was it acutely monitoring or manipulating his heart rate, and then is it going to last or not, because it went back up shortly after?
My understanding is it definitely does last, because it's to do with the cardiac function of the heart. Like, example, how efficiently does it beat? How efficiently are you transporting oxygen? Obviously, there's other factors that play there. But yeah, my understanding is that it's your current state. It's sort of like body fat. Like you have body fat on you. You reduce or not, similar like what's your VO2 peak, VO2 max. That can fluctuate a fair bit, but it should be lasting. I would say if you're getting fluctuations in your resting heart rate, it, as you said, could be other factors there. Like, for example, if you have a poor night of sleep, that can jack up your resting heart rate a fair bit. So I would say the cardio is lasting as long as you're doing it consistently, which I believe you are. It's probably more so the other factors, kicking in there, or other factors affecting it. I mean, this is an obvious one, who probably knows, but like if you're taking your sort of stimulants, prior to testing it, people also have to realize things like clenbuterol, I believe it's like 24-hour half-life or long half-life, that can affect resting heart rate. As we said many times before, any ADHD medication, that can affect it too. So yeah, dude, long story short, I think the cardio does last. It's probably just other things that play there.
Yeah, 1000%. And it's so tough too, because heart rate's influenced by so many different things. And it like if you're hypotensive, oh my God, sorry. If you're hypotensive, that can cause an elevated heart rate. If you're electric current is off, as weird as that sounds, or let's just say you're a little bit deficient in potassium or magnesium, like that can cause ions to be less efficient around the heart or the myocardium, and you get effects. So it is tough. His case is a bit unique where, he's having to do some pretty radical shit to control his heart rate, but it is what it is. Beavis asks, trying to try the Beast Super Test Booster.
Beavis, you're trolling us. Come on, you surely, my man. Okay. If you're legitimately taking a test booster, which I mean, this sounds like every name of every test booster I've ever seen on supplement store shelves.
This is like, yeah.
I would argue that you're wasting your time, my man. Rather go get some blood work, see where your levels are at, and see, oh fuck, it exists. Oh fuck,
yeah,
and just go maybe use some TRT, that's being prescribed to you, and you'll have a much better time and probably save more money.
Yeah, I'm dying already at the fucking proprietary names. Anti-estrogen shield.
Protect you from the estradiol.
Anti-DHD shield. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Japanese knotweed extract. It's your anime shield against estrogen. Oh, fuck.
Yeah, brother. Yeah, even
anti-DHD shield.
Even the fenugreek that they have in there is, an ineffective dose. It's not even like clinically effective. It needs to be around 600 to 750 milligrams. So, and the
ashwagandha.
Yep, exactly. The same with the ashwagandha. I mean, it's just a waste of money, man. It's not gonna.
Yeah.
Most test boosters, unfortunately, as great as their marketing can seem, are just so wildly ineffective. So, I would save your money, and just realistically, if you need to boost your testosterone, pin testosterone. You're about the age where TRT makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you can also try DHEA and pregnenolone. I've seen that increase serum levels of total testosterone on blood work. It's not crazy, although I did have a natural client go from, I believe, 770 nanogram per deciliter to actually it was like 1103, I believe, slightly above the reference range, which I was not actually expecting, which was a pretty significant increase for him. But again, it's not like he tangibly felt it. It's not like he was like, oh, I'm doing DHEA and pregnenolone. Like, we're like, oh, cool, that was cool on blood work, but didn't make it, an actual tangible difference. So, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on you look at pinning testosterone, it's going to be your best bet.
Yeah, and as Twisted Titanium said, almost 50 test is best. I think at that age, you're gonna thrive off intramuscular testosterone, brother.
Yeah, for sure. A night and day difference.
Yeah, he ate some edamame. Yeah, exactly. He asks, how should you adapt your training when you're deep into a fat loss diet or diet/phase? What are your best ways to train to conserve muscle tissue? Hard to keep up with higher volumes when glycogen is low. We actually covered this with Jared on a podcast, and he went in depth far greater than probably we could do. If you want to, it's the last live that we did. That was when Jared was on, I believe. And you'll see it. It's on the title. It says with Jared Feather. And he goes through this in great detail. Basically, he actually will increase intensity techniques like what we call like myo reps, which is, you can look this up on YouTube as well. Dr. Mike will explain it to you. But also lowering straight sets and trying to inevitably reduce the strength output so that people can't injure themselves when in a highly deleterious position. So generally the rule of thumb is lower volume a little bit, conserve that energy. You don't need a ton of volume to maintain or even slightly grow muscle tissue. You just need enough to sustain it. And maintenance volume is as low as 3 sets per week on each muscle tissue. So
yeah,
it's pretty liberal.
To further add to that, I personally think, and I think Jared echoed this too, and what he was saying, is the most important thing I think to do is focus on doing your best to maintain training performance. Now, if you're doing a prep, obviously there's going to be some degradation to training performance. When I mean training performance, I define that as like what is total amounts of load, reps, and sets you're doing. In other words, maintain the stimulus you're getting. And I think basically focusing your the most on progressive overload. In other words, trying to make sure you're matching or even adding a rep on the exercises throughout the whole of prep. So I do this with all my clients. During a prep phase, we monitor training quite closely, because if I see huge rep drop-offs or huge drop-offs in training performance, I know, oh shit, potentially, unless other factors are at play, like, sleep or diet or something like that went to skew, we could potentially be losing muscle, in which case, like, do we need to change the PED load? Do we need to change the refeed amount? Do we have to change the volume? Do we have to pull out or add in intensity modifiers? So I would just say, in a deep cut, try your best to maintain train performance. And if you see that like train performance is like just dropping off a cliff, and also you see like your rate of body fat loss or weight loss is like above 1.5%, per week, you're probably pushing too fast and cutting calories too soon, or eventually not using enough PEDs to support that. Well, that's more so about how much muscle mass you have, in which case that can give you a good indicator of, are you losing muscle mass? So that's what I would say. Yeah, we could probably go on about this, but Colton's right. Jared sums it up much better. But that's what I would be looking for.
Yeah. Twisted titanium, what ratio of would you run test using either Masteron or EQ or both? We don't really do ratios, unfortunately. Yeah, it depends.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry. It depends. I would say if you are a high aromatizer, it would be, a lower dose of testosterone and a higher dose of the other compounds. If you're a low aromatizer like myself, I can, pretty much indefinitely run testosterone up and not have any estrogenic issues. So it would be a high testosterone dose and a relatively lower Masteron and equipoise dose. So it's just kind of what your body responds best with per your unique biological imprint.
Yeah. And to give you an idea, like, I'm a high aromatizer. I can literally run like a 1-to-2 ratio, 2 being DHT derivative. I have a client literally right now who's taking 500 milligrams of testosterone with 50 milligrams of primobolan, and his estradiol is on like the lower end of the range, which is pretty wild. So that's what I'm saying. It's impossible for us to go like, oh, like this is the ratio that's going to work for you. Like, what I would recommend is shoot to the highest dose of testosterone where your estradiol is just in range, slightly bump it up, add a DHT, and then start playing with like the amount of DHT to testosterone to keep it within range. And then you're going to find out that's going to be your personal ratio, which can also fluctuate in time, what compounds you're using, what your body fat's like, etc. So long story short, like frequent blood work and testing your own ratio, so to speak.
Exactly. Sebastian asks, and this is an interesting question, might be out of scope, but you never fail to impress me. For my girl, not myself. Thoughts on long-term oral chlorpromazine for migraine management? Chlorpromazine is, from the name of it, is a phenothiazine, and we, as far as I know, which isn't much because I don't really care I haven't had an instance where I needed to research this. We don't even know the mechanism of action, right? It's thought to be a dopamine agonist, but we don't even know if that's like it's like seen in like a couple studies. It's not even like an accurate statement. So, I don't know. I can't say for sure. I just know that the thing that scares me about it is the fact that it's unknown per the mechanism of action, basically.
Yeah. To further add to that, Sebastian, I would say, unfortunately, this is kind of out of our scope because typically, I mean, if someone has severe chronic migraines, we are going to refer them to a medical practitioner who studied this. It's their area of expertise. Unfortunately, whilst we focus on bodybuilding and those side effects, this is something we typically don't research into. Just Googling it right now, it looks like it's used to treat schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and acute psychosis. Again, I'm not claiming this is like medical advice, but in my experience with people close to me as well as clients, there's a medication. It's actually, since you're in Australia, you should be able to get this. It's called Max Out, which is Retatrutide. I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly, but it's a medication which comes in like a wafer, and that has been shown to basically dissipate migraines almost immediately upon use. So if she suffers from chronic migraines, literally Google Max Out, MAXALT, which is the brand name of Retatrutide, and you should be able to get that in Australia if she hasn't tried that already. I've seen that be wildly effective. Again, in her case, I don't know what other acute or other condition she has, but she hasn't tried Max Out before. Ask her doctor about that because I've seen it used really, really well with ex-clients of mine.
Yeah, are those the little, like, you put them on your tongue and it dissolves? Yeah,
Yes,
I've
yes,
seen those. Those do work spectacularly. Yeah.
yeah,
I used
yeah,
to have horrible migraines when I was a kid, and I
mm,
would take that, and it would
yeah, yeah, yeah.
nuke it right away virtually.
Yeah, I don't know the actual mechanism of action of the drug, but I specifically remember an ex-client of mine. We were trying to troubleshoot these migraines, and nothing worked except taking those wafers, and she basically carried them everywhere she went, and it worked wonderfully well. Um, that was the only thing that worked for her specifically. So I'll say just look into that. That's the extent of my knowledge when it comes to migraines.
Yeah. Do you all think carb cycling may be overrated if your medium days result in less training performance? Why not just raise calories statically? You pose a very beautifully asked and articulated question.
Mm,
You are right. Statically speaking, I think me and Adam both do this. Like the typical Justin Harris method of carb cycling is like extremely high carbohydrates on high days, like thousands of grams of carbohydrates. And then on medium and low days, it's quite, for what is normal, low carbohydrate intake. And with low days reaching like verging basically a keto diet, and then medium days reaching like a slightly above keto diet.
mm,
So I agree. I think that across the board, it's almost more beneficial to statistically speaking increase the average calories just by increasing the calories per day instead of just abnormally increasing them on one day. Most clients I
Yep,
have don't even have high days, they just have low and medium days. High
agreed.
days are reserved for people who do have quite an exceptional amount of muscle mass, and their glycogen
Yes.
stores do get depleted quite rapidly.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. I think Justin Harris is great, and his proponent of the carbohydrate, or his proportion I can't speak. Him propelling the carbohydrate cycle model is great, but I also think you have to look at the specific use case. If you're a 300-pound bodybuilder, which a lot of his clients are, or rather larger individuals who are depleting fuckloads of muscle glycogen,
Yeah.
you're using growth hormone, insulin, higher dosages of androgens. They're going to have a much different use case or need, or basically depletion of glycogen than your average individual. So much so that high days make sense. Like Paul spoke about how his metabolism just basically went through the roof, and he was having like 2 or 3 high days, one off season. That's not going to be most individuals. In which case, as Colton was saying, I think having a low day, which is not necessarily a ketogenic diet, but it's specifically pull back on carbohydrates, and just having medium days, which are almost like 70% of a super high day, so to speak. I find that model works a lot better, so that you are getting enough you are getting enough fuel, so to speak, on your train days. Because you are correct there. If your medium days are resulting in less train performance, then I would argue we need to increase the amount of calories or amount of carbohydrates on your medium days. So what my clients look like, similar to Colton's, is that we'll have low days, which are relatively low carbohydrates, maybe a high amount of protein and fats. Okay, but then on my medium days, they're almost like high days in themselves. And I only really throw in a high day if there's like a specific body part they really want to bring up, and their weight is not like spiking up; it's going up. I guess the appropriate rate of gain, so to speak. And we are typically using things like insulin, maybe growth hormone, where they're going to benefit from a high caloric day. Otherwise, I just increase their medium days, or training days, as I like to
Right.
call it.
Yeah, I think so. All right, man. Well, I got to get off. It has been a long night here, and I got to eat and go to bed soon. So, I appreciate everyone for getting on. Just as a brief reminder, if you're still tuned in, which we have more concurrent viewers than we've ever had at this point in the podcast, but if you're still tuned in, we do have the Discord live. You can always access that and ask questions whenever you'd like. We'll be on there. Adam actually is not on there yet. I will invite him on there, and he can choose to be on there if he likes to. And basically, you can ask away questions. We have sources in the Discord that can talk to you directly if you need stuff, and work with y'all just like that. So I appreciate everyone. Thank you for tuning into the live. If you need anything, you always know how to reach out to us. Instagram, Discord, in the comments section, and we'll be there. We'll see you next time.
Take care, guys.